Hello and welcome to the Project Management Prepcast. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. This lesson is recorded with a live audience on Facebook and YouTube. So hello to everybody who is joining me live today. Please do not hesitate, if you have any questions, to put those in the chat and I'll bring them up and try to answer them right there. Today we are going to be doing a general overview of the PMBOK guide. And when I say a general overview, then I mean that we will not be doing an in-depth review of its content. So we're not going to be talking about the knowledge areas, project management principles, or project performance domains. Instead, we want to see what the PMBOK guide is and what it means for your PMP exam. And you can clearly see this here also in our agenda. These are all the topics that I have for you today. And I think the three topics that are most interesting for everybody preparing for the PMP exam are the topic bullet point 3, 4, and 5 there. I'm going to be talking about study materials. I'm going to give you some ideas for what to do next. And I have some takeaways there at the end. But we have to start by looking at the current paradigm shift and the fact that the PMBOK guide is not the PMP exam. And then I want to dispel some myths about the PMP exam and the PMBOK guide as well. But before we jump into all of that, please don't forget that we offer a complete online suite of PMP exam preparation tools. On the left, we have the PM Prepcast, which is our on-demand self-study PMP training course at pmprepcast.com. And on the right, you see the Prepcast simulator at pmexamsimulator.com. Everything you learn in the Prepcast, you can then fire up the exam simulator and practice on real-life exam sample questions. There's also a free version of the simulator, by the way, at freepmexamsimulator.com. Right. The first thing we have to acknowledge that at the time of this recording, we are going through a paradigm shift in regards to the PMBOK guide. Right now, both PMBOK 6 and PMBOK 7 are available, and PMI has also developed its not so good online repository of project management knowledge called Standards Plus. What we're seeing here is the paradigm shift from PMBOK 6, which was focused on the how do you do project management, the process-oriented work we all do as we manage our projects, to the PMBOK 7, which is principles-based. So what's important when you manage a project? And slowly but surely, PMBOK 6 is shifting from its current form over into Standards Plus. But even though we have this paradigm shift, it is very important for all of us to acknowledge that the process-based approach will continue to be used going forward. I'm telling you, just because PMI has decided we're now publishing a principles-based PMBOK guide, you still have to know how is cost managed? How do I develop a budget? How do I develop a schedule? Okay. All of that knowledge is still important for us project managers. So everything that's currently in the PMBOK Guide 6 and that process-oriented knowledge, it will continue to be important for the future. Okay. And that much said, there is one more very important thing that I need to get across, and that's this here. If you go away from this lesson here today, and this is all you remember, perfect. The PMP exam is not a test of the PMBOK guide. The PMP exam is based on the questions that are on the exam content outline, the ECO. This is really, really important, and I'll get back to this at least 2 or 3 times in the upcoming presentation here. Many people think I need to study for the PMP exam using the PMBOK guide, and that's it. That is not the case. If you do not know the ECO, if you don't have a copy of the ECO, then you do not know what to expect on the PMP exam. Get yourself a copy of the exam content outline. And even though this is the case, the number one question that everybody who is a PMP trainer gets is this one here. I am preparing for my PMP exam in 2022. Well, do I read the 6th edition or the 7th edition? The answer is, right now, you really have to use both. The 6th edition is very important for you to learn and understand all the process-oriented, the hard skills, if you wish, of managing a schedule, managing a budget, and all of that. And the 7th edition is important, or is becoming more and more important when it comes to the principles and the performance domains of project management. More about this at the end, those 3 last bullet points that we're going to be looking at when I'm giving you some ideas for study materials and such. And now we are moving on to the myths, all those myths, the things people say about the PMBOK guide that are, well, just not true. And the first one is this here. The PMBOK guide is the standard for project management. Well, that is incorrect, because at least since, I'm not sure about PMBOK Guide 4th edition, but pretty much PMBOK Guide 5th edition and 6th edition and 7th edition, this is not the case. The PMBOK Guide is not a standard. Instead, there is a separate standard in the book. The PMBOK Guide, the document that you may have a printed version of, actually consists of 2 publications. One of those publications is the standard for project management. It's an ANSI standard. And the other part of it is the guide. PMBOK 5 and PMBOK 6 used to have the guide first and the standard second. And now in PMBOK 7, as you can see here on the left, the standard comes first. That's the white box there at the top. And the PMBOK guide comes second. That's this, what is this color? Pale purple, lilac? I don't know. Whatever that color is of the big box at the bottom there, that is the PMBOK guide. Here is the difference. The standard for project management, it provides you with a basic understanding of project management and how it enables outcomes. And it discusses 12 principles to do that. On the other hand, the PMBOK guide talks about 8 domains, 8 performance domains. And also it talks about tailoring, and it discusses in a limited way models, methods, and artifacts. So let me go one slide back here. This is what you see again at the top. Those many, many smaller bullet points, those are the 12 principles that the standard for project management talks about. And at the bottom, the smaller bullet points, those are the performance domains that you will learn about when you are reading the PMBOK guide. And let me once again remind you, we're not going to open this up and go into detail about this, because right now we're doing a high-level overview and look at the PMBOK guide, the document itself. Next myth. The PMBOK guide is a best practice, a prescriptive cookbook for project management. That is not the case, because the PMBOK guide is not a cookbook. It's not intended as a cookbook, never has been. A cookbook would be a methodology that you use and apply on your project that tells you exactly what is the task 1 and task 2 and task 3 in the method that I'm using. This is instead a document that talks about what are some good practices for project management. What are the things that you should be doing and how you should be doing them, applicable for most projects most of the time. And that basically means if it's most projects most of the time, you could have a project where you'd have to say, this is not applicable to me at all. So not my project and not now. And that's perfectly okay, because that's the intent of the PMBOK guide. If it doesn't fit your needs, don't use it. Next myth is the PMBOK guide was written by an unknown author. Somebody at PMI came up with this, so they've written it, and we're just eating whatever they are feeding us. Well, that is not the case, because in the PMBOK guide, every version that I know of, it's written by your colleagues, right? By hundreds of your colleagues, in fact. In the current version, the 7th edition there, pages 197 to 206, so that's 6 pages worth of densely list of densely populated names, and I've highlighted 3 here. So shout out to Herbert Gonder, and also a shout out to Jeff Furman here, who are also listed together with me on page 200 of the PMBOK guide 7th edition. Now, don't get me wrong here, right? I do not know what the involvement of Herbert or Jeff was in the development of the PMBOK guide. My involvement was relatively small. I participated in 2, maybe 3 workshops together with PMI as PMBOK 7 was developed. So I had maybe a 5-6 hour involvement in the development of the PMBOK guide 7th edition. So very small, but PMI, gives credit where credit is due. So my name does indeed appear on the PMBOK guide, in the PMBOK guide there, and the people who have written it. Okay. Moving on to the next myth. The PMBOK guide describes project management in all of its flavors. Well, that is definitely not true for the older versions. PMBOK 5, purely plan-driven, purely predictive. Then PMBOK 6 started adding a little bit of agile into this, okay? And now PMBOK 7, we clearly have the situation where you can say that it is applicable globally. So the principles of PMBOK 7, they apply globally, but historically, the PMBOK guide tends to shine a much bigger light on projects for internal customers, and it ignores doing projects as profit centers. So if you are a consultant and you not only sell a product and a service, but you also sell your project management experience, right? I sell you my project, and I also know how to manage that project, and the project is really a big part of what you're selling me. And then you're sort of the prime contractor, and you're dealing with the customer on one side and the subcontractors on the other side. So all of that is not really part of what the PMBOK guide talks about. So it's primarily internal projects. Then we have another myth here, and that is the fact that the PMBOK guide follows a waterfall or plan-driven project management approach. Again, pretty correct for PMBOK guide 5th edition. That was plan-driven, that was waterfall-based. PMBOK 6 started to bring in the initial ideas for agile and other methodologies, and now PMBOK 7, I would say, covers many life cycles, right? Let me make it clear, many life cycles, not all life cycles, right? It goes from highly predictive to highly exploratory life cycles. So we have waterfall, incremental, agile, pretty much everything is there, okay? And you'll get all of that. And you will also get agile questions on the PMP exam at this point. And here we have a question coming in from Yatra Tuber. Please mention more on how to tackle with agile questions. I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer that question today, because today our focus is on the PMBOK guide and not on how to answer questions on the exam. So apologies for that. Let's see then. If PMBOK Guide is shifting project manager to a paradigm from process manager to a product manager, am I correct? No, I don't think that shift of the paradigm is intended to turn us into something else. The paradigm shift is more from PMBOK 6 talked about the how do you do project management? How do you create a budget? How do you create a schedule? Whereas PMBOK 7, the paradigm shift is more into understanding what's important. What are the important things that we have to think about as we manage projects, no matter what methodology we use? So this is the paradigm shift that we are currently seeing. Moving on to the next myth. The PMBOK Guide uses a one-size-fits-all project approach. No, it doesn't, because with PMBOK 6, there is clearly the understanding, and I believe even in PMBOK 5, most projects are not equal, right? There is a huge difference between building a pyramid versus doing an online advertising campaign project for a dentist in your local area, right? In fact, the PMBOK Guide 7th edition has a dedicated section on tailoring. And this is important. This section is about 20 pages long, which is a full 10% of the PMBOK Guide. So 10% of the PMBOK Guide discusses tailoring and the fact that projects are not all equal. We have large projects, we have small projects. You have to tailor your approach to your project needs. Moving on to our next myth. And that is this one right here. Now that the PMBOK Guide 7th edition is published, all previous editions are irrelevant. You may have guessed by the fact that I keep referring back to 5th edition and 6th edition a little bit here, that this myth is probably not true. Yeah, that is indeed the case. The previous editions are relevant and will remain to be relevant. In fact, the PMBOK Guide 7th edition says this here. Nothing in this edition, the 7th edition, negates alignment with the process-based approach of past editions. The process-based approach remains relevant in the context of this new edition. Okay. And that much said, it is quite important to realize, and by the way, Ravi Kumar, as you are seeing this right now, this is live. This is not a recording right now. Many people will probably see this recorded, but you are watching this live as you are joining me. Hi, Ravi Kumar. So with this out of the way, what the PMBOK Guide says, let me make one thing absolutely clear. Let's take a look at the history of the PMBOK Guide and how it evolved. PMBOK Guide 1 is on the left-hand side with 182 pages. And then, as you can see, each version added more and more and more pages to it, with PMBOK Guide 6 there at 756 pages, an absolute whopper of a book. And then we suddenly have a drop from 756 to 350, right? And you might now think, oh, fantastic. Project management has become simpler. It's easier because the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, 7th edition, has more than half or fewer than half the pages than the previous edition. Unfortunately, that is not the case. The PMBOK Guide 6th edition and all previous editions, they talk about the how of managing projects. How do I manage a schedule? How do I manage risk? How do I get involved with the stakeholders? What are all the hard tools and techniques that I need? Whereas the PMBOK Guide 7th edition talks about the principles of project management. Okay, so from a perspective, the PMBOK Guide 7th edition talks about the strategies. It's high level. It's up in the clouds a little bit. okay, so that you understand what's important and what things should I focus on. It does not talk about the actual how. It doesn't give you any information about how do I manage cost, how do I manage my stakeholders, the risk, communication, not discussed at a level where you can say, I now know how to manage a project. So if you are a project manager newcomer and you read PMBOK Guide 7 there, 350 pages, then you will be left wondering. It's like, okay, I now understand the principles, but my boss is telling me to create a schedule. How on earth do I create a schedule for my project? Not discussed. So those 756 pages of the PMBOK Guide 6th edition will remain important for all project managers. And since we are also talking about the PMP exam here, these 756 pages will remain relevant for the PMP exam. Okay. The next myth. The PMBOK Guide is the basis for the PMP certification. Yeah, for those of you who have been with me here in this presentation for the last 20 minutes or so, then yeah, we talked about this, right? By now, you should know the PMBOK Guide is not the basis of the PMP exam. It is the exam content outline, which is why we're moving on to the next myth. PMI uses the PMBOK Guide as the only reference to develop PMP exam questions. This is a total myth because of two words, and those two words are the only. PMI uses the PMBOK Guide as the only reference to develop PMP exam questions. That is the myth. It would be correct, however, to say PMI uses the PMBOK Guide as a reference to develop the PMP exam questions. Now, you may be asking me, well, what is the difference if they're using it as the only or a? The difference is that there are a total of 10 official reference books for the PMP exam, and the PMBOK Guide is only one of those 10. Let's take a look at them. Here we go. Here they are. These are the 10 reference books. As you can see, it starts with the Agile Practice Guide there, and then the PMBOK Guide is the second book in the list, and then you can continue looking at these here. Number 9, the managerial project management process, essential Scrum is here, fundamentals of technology project management, and so on. Okay. Then what's also important to know is when PMI develops they call them items for the PMP exam. We call them questions, right? So when PMI develops questions for the PMP exam and answers, then each question, each correct answer has to have 2 of these reference books as a foundation and say, book number 6 and book number 8 agree. So what does this mean, right? This means that if I develop a question for the PMP exam and that question happens to be an agile question, well, then I'm going to say, well, my question is based on information found in the Agile Practice Guide and information found in Essential Scrum, a practical guide to the most popular agile projects. Notice something? The question that I have just developed is not referencing the PMBOK Guide at all. And that is not unusual. Again, the PMP exam is not based on the PMBOK Guide. Questions on the PMP exam are not always referencing the PMBOK Guide. There are a multitude of references and a multitude of sources that help PMI inform and develop its questions. And by the way, we do exactly the same thing with all the products that we develop. We follow the same approach. Now, with that said, the next myth should be obvious to you that it is not correct. Okay, I must read the complete PMBOK guide to prepare for the PMP exam. So let me go back. So you've just read the PMBOK guide here, right? Number 2. What about all the rest? What about all the information that's in the other books, right? No. So this is definitely incorrect. This myth is totally wrong. Okay? There is a slightly better version of this myth, and that slightly better version is this here. I must study the complete PMBOK guide to prepare for the PMP exam. That's already a little bit better. There is a huge difference between reading the PMBOK guide or reading any textbook and studying the textbook. Reading, I read Harry Potter, right? Studying, I'm studying the PMBOK guide and other books as I'm preparing for the PMP exam. There is a mental difference. One is for enjoyment and one is to increase your knowledge. But even so, it is still a myth. You do not have to study the complete PMBOK guide to prepare for the PMP exam. Now, let's just focus on the PMP exam, and let me tell you what you should be looking at in the PMBOK guide here. Okay, so for the PMP exam relevant sections in the PMBOK guide 6th edition, this here is what you should do. Please feel free to take a screenshot of this here. So you need to study the PMBOK guide, which is part 1 of the 6th edition. Then part 2 is the standard. And when I say low here in relevance there in line number 2, low means don't even look at it. Do not look at PMBOK guide 6, the standard for project management. Just skip it. Forget it. Don't look at it. You will not need it for your PMP exam. Appendix X3 and X6, very high, you need to read it. The glossary, very high, you need to read it. So this is the PMP exam relevance when it comes to the PMBOK guide 6th edition. Okay. And then the PMP exam relevance here for the 7th edition is at this time. Remember, we are in this paradigm shift right now. So at the time of this recording, this is my recommendation. This is why I'm putting PMBOK 6 as medium relevance, because it takes PMI to begin using PMBOK 7 as one of its references. The standard for project management in PMBOK Guide 7 with its 12 principles, you have to read it. The PMBOK Guide itself with its 8 performance domains, you have to read it. You don't have to study it. Notice the difference? You have to read it and have a general good understanding of what they're talking about. Appendix X2, X4, yes, that's medium relevant. And the glossary, it's kind of medium to high. But, you know, you want to make sure that you understand the glossary just as you made sure in the PMBOK Guide 6th edition here that you understand the glossary as well. And while we're talking about the standard and those 12 principles, Calvin asks, you know, there are potentially thousands of practices and principles of project management. How did PMI select the practices, which principles to incorporate into the PMBOK guide? This really takes me back, Calvin, to the section where I said the PMBOK guide was written by an unknown author, right? Because you say, how on earth did PMI select this, right? Oh, no, sorry, I read that wrong. How did PMI select it, okay? Well, PMI didn't. We did. We, the contributors to the PMBOK guide, we, the authors of the PMBOK guide, clearly stated which of these many principles do we, as practitioners, feel are important. So it's not PMI that says that these 12 principles are the most important ones. It is us, the authors, who say, those who contributed to the creation of the PMBOK guide. Okay. Now then, let me take us all back to this question here, because you may have noticed that I didn't put very high in any of these, right? PMBOK 6 was high, PMBOK 7 is kind of medium. What has a PMP exam relevance of very high? This lesson is about the PMBOK guide, so this is more of an aside here. Very high is the PMP exam content outline. Okay, the exam syllabus and content is defined in the ECO, so it is really important for you to know about the ECO and understand the ECO in addition to all the other knowledge that you need. That was it for all the myths that I wanted to go through. I did promise to you that I'm going to go through study materials, takeaways, and take action. And that's what we're going to be doing next. So here are my recommended study materials. And again, as a caveat, I've put it here that we're talking about study materials for early 2022 and study materials for late 2022. This will change over time as PMI makes new announcements, as we learn things. And, that means that sometime in the future, we're going to repeat this live stream here with updated information. Okay, so on the left, early 2022. Right now, you need to download and know the exam content outline. That is the basis for the PMP exam. Then you need to study the PMBOK Guide 6th edition in order to understand the process-focused approach. You need to study the Agile Practice Guide and the Scrum Guide because 50% of your exam is going to be about Agile. And you need to have a good working knowledge of the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. And you should get yourself a PMP exam prep course to get the 35 contact hours that you need, and you need a PMP exam simulator so that you can take the 6-7 bullet points at the top and apply them to good PMP sample questions. And then moving into late 2022, there's really only one difference. And this is where PMI is shifting us from the PMBOK Guide 6th edition to its new online repository, PMI Standards Plus. And yes, I am not very shy in saying that I do not like that website. In my opinion, it is not very user-friendly. Let me put it as politically correct as I can. So the only difference between the left side and the right side is PMI Standards Plus. And that's where in the future you will get the knowledge about the process-oriented, the how, the plan-driven kind of knowledge, the how do I manage a schedule, how do I create a budget. That's where you will find that. Here's a question from Yatra. Does the PMBOK 7 have more agile content? The PMBOK Guide 7th edition is completely agnostic. It does not discuss any types of methodology. That is why 2 bullet points here are the Agile Practice Guide and the Scrum Guide. So you cannot read the PMBOK Guide and expect to know everything you need to know on Agile for your PMP exam. Okay. Now then, what's most important on this list? I already said that the PMP exam content outline at the top has a really high relevance for the PMP exam. But what do you think are the 2 most important bullet points that we have here on this slide? Well, the answer is it's actually the 2 at the bottom. Your PMP exam prep course and your PMP exam simulator. There is so much knowledge that you need. Remember, 756 pages, you need Agile, you need understanding of Scrum, you need the principles, the performance analysis, all of that. Yeah, of course, you could read all of these books here that we have seen, but frankly, the 2 areas, the 2 bullets here at the bottom, that is the most important thing. You want a PMP exam prep course and you want a PMP exam simulator. Yeah, and this is obviously the moment when I bring in this slide again. As a quick reminder, we do offer both the PrepCast training, which is our training course to help you prep for the PMP exam, and the exam simulator so that you can apply your knowledge on on about 2,000 plus solidly developed PMP exam prep questions. Okay. Oh, by the way, thank you, Sudeep. Hi, Cornelius. Your PMP exam simulator is the best simulator according to me. Thank you for helping me to pass the PMP in December 21. Thank you so much, Sudeep. And as I always do in a moment like this, I have not asked Sudeep to post this message here as we are doing the live stream. This is his personal opinion and comes from the heart from him. Thank you. Take action. Here are 2 things that I want you to do. Remember, there are a lot more things that you need to do as you're preparing for the PMP exam, but today we're talking about the PMBOK guide in particular. So my 2 actions that I want you to do is I want you to download the PMBOK guide PDF from PMI by going to pmprepcast.com/PMBOK-DL, as in PMBOK download DL. That will take you to the page on PMI's website where you can download it. And I would also like you to check out PMI's new online repository, standardsplus.pmi.org. At the time of this recording, it is still possible to download the PMBOK Guide 6th edition from PMI's website as a PDF document. You have to be a member, okay? So you have to log in, then you can download both PMBOK 6 and PMBOK 7 as a PDF document. PMI has announced that they will stop offering PMBOK Guide 6th edition in printed form and as a PDF download on March 31st of this year. So from the time of this recording, you have about 6-8 weeks until that will be stopped. My big question is still, where are you going to get all the process-oriented knowledge from? Because as I mentioned earlier, the Standards Plus website that PMI has is not very user-friendly. PMI, please listen, not very user-friendly. Okay, I think I've made my point here. Thank you, everybody. Pleasure being with you here today. The takeaways. I keep saying this again and again, but it is so important for everyone to understand. The PMBOK guide is not the PMP exam. It's the exam content outline that defines what will be on the PMP exam and what will be tested. The PMBOK guide is one of 10 reference books that you need to understand for the exam. We are in a paradigm shift. PMI is shifting us from PMBOK 6 to PMBOK 7. However, the concepts, the process-oriented concepts from version 6, they are not going to go away. Your boss will want you to create a schedule. Your boss will want you to be knowledgeable about how to manage quality on your projects. And V7, these are the concepts that are coming. These are principles. These are not going to be informing you about this. The future will show where the concepts from version 6 are best to be obtained. At the moment, as you are preparing for the PMP exam, then a PMP exam prep course and a simulator are better than reading 10 books. Got a question here from Shirzain who says, can I pass the exam without going through PMBOK 7 if I've already started the preparation on number 6? Shirzain, excuse me, my recommendation is do read the PMBOK Guide 7th edition at least once, go through it, understand what the principles are, and have a good working knowledge at this time. Remember, right now, good working knowledge. Later on in 2022, you really have to have it down solidly. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining me. Good luck on your exam, and until next time. But before you go, please don't forget, this lesson is part of a series of videos in which I help you to be better prepared for your PMP exam. Please do visit pmprepcast.com/more to watch all of them.